and people occupying and sharing the same space. And I think we've studied some of these texts together before, but our tradition is not one where you're one and done. You look at it once and then we're good and we're through with it, right? This is why we read the same Torah portions every year. Every year we get a shot at them because we're going to relate to them differently, and we're going to see them differently through the lens of what we're living through. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at some texts about the ways that we communicate with each other, and specifically around, Judaism is a religion where we as a people and as a culture immensely value disagreement and debate and arguing. We're really into it, but we're into it from a place of respect, and we're into what I like to call sacred dialogue, right? The discourse has to be rooted in respect, and in a certain level of kindness at some point. So we're going to look at some of what our tradition has to say about the ways we argue and the ways that we communicate. But first, we offer our blessing for Torah study. We say Baruch Atah Yeah, it's such a goofy thing when we do it out of sync, but we seem to find a way through. We seem to get through it all the time. So there we go. The weird little Zoom delay. It's easier than singing, but it's harder than in person. We're getting there. So I'm going to move around sort of the page I have here. So we've got a piece from the Mishnah, and then we've got commentary on the Mishnah. So Pirkei Avot is Mishnah. We like to separate it out like it's its own thing. It's a regular chapter of Mishnah. It's not, it's called Mishnah Avot, not Pirkei Avot. Pirkei are sayings, Avot are fathers. So the tractate of Mishnah, the order of Mishnah, it's not tractate, in order, is Avot. And here's what Mishnah Avot says. Every argument that is for the sake of heaven's name, the end thereof will endure. But if it is not for the sake of heaven's name, it is not destined to endure. What is an example of an argument for the sake of heaven's name? The argument of Hillel and Shammai. What is an example of an argument not for the sake of heaven's name? The argument of Korach and all of his followers. So the term here, in the sake of heaven's name, is l'shem shamayim. L'shem shamayim. What do you think are these two categories?
I think it's coming from, it depends on the argument who it's coming from. It's the person. Hillel and Shammai were good people, and Korach wasn't, and his followers weren't very good. So it's the source of the argument, it seems like to me.
The source of the argument. Okay, what might other differences be?
The topic.
The topic, okay, how?
Well, if it's related to a religious aspect or if it's related to a secular aspect.
Okay. So the sort of the validity of the discussion, maybe the weight of the topic, of the content. So we're talking about, I think, three pieces here that maybe are determiners: the content, the people involved, and I would add the third, which is how the conversation is had. Right? I think that those are sort of the three pieces that we're looking at about how can this endure. So it says that it will endure, it will keep going. Hillel and Shammai argue forever and ever and ever and ever, right? It's like the same people. You can sit and you can debate with people who are good and you trust and you respect and they respect you. You can do over and over, as opposed to a one-off. Yeah, Alan, did you have something?
I say that twosome even played in vaudeville. They were really stuck together, you know.
Absolutely. So the term that's really interesting to me, it says for the sake of heaven's name, l'shem shamayim. L'shem shamayim. Shem is a name. Hashem sheli Jordy. My name is Jordy. Shem is a name. Shamayim is heavens. It's also just sky. Mm-hmm. And so an argument for the sake of heaven, what do you think? What does that say to you? What do you think that means?
I always think of it as moving truth forward. So we have these unanswerable questions that lend themselves to these arguments. And and that actually arguing from different perspectives can give us some movement towards a greater truth.
So I think one of the things that you just said was really important was unanswerable,
Uh-huh.
right?
Sometimes, but sometimes we get there, or at least situationally.
I wonder if is that a conversation for the sake of Machoket L'Shem Shamayim? Is that in the category? If you can land to an answer, right? Hillel and Shammai never really stand and say, okay, that's the final answer. We walk away, we're done, we've got the answer. Other people take their debate and say, okay, that's our answer. But the two of them never do. They just go in circles.
Yeah, not even with like lighting the Hanukkah.
No, they have some level of agreement on some things, but their
Or
sort of sacred relationship that's founded in debating each other
Right.
is never completed, really.
They're saying, for God's sakes, let's end this thing already. See you tomorrow.
See, they thrive on it. They live for this, right? This is what they're built upon. Their lives are built upon. So it's really interesting. One of the ways we sometimes use this term is L'Shem Shamayim means almost for its own sake. So what does that mean? That you have a dialogue, you have a conversation, you have a debate for the sake of it, right? Just for the sake of sort of the mental exercise. So we had 5 years of rabbinical school. For 5 years, my classmates and I, because it's a very small group, I spent 5 years all day, every day of my life with the same 9 people. Right.
Wow.
That's an adventure in and of itself. And as you can imagine, the people who decide to be rabbis were an interesting bunch. And so we spent 5 years together. And what did we debate for 5 years? What is cake?
What is cake?
What is cake? What is the definition of cake? Is a cupcake a cake? Is a brownie a cake? Is a cheesecake, which has cake in the name, a cake? Is an ice cream sandwich a cake? Right? How many layers of definition? Is a cookie a cake? How many layers is ice cream cake a cake? Right? How do you define what cake is to figure out what it is? That's a silly argument, but it actually parallels what I see as a machoket l'shem shamayim, an argument for its own sake, right? You just sort of, you chip away at it and you whittle it and you engage la'asok b'divrei Torah, the blessing we just said, you engage for the sake of engaging. For the sake of using our brains, we were given these thinking machines that live in our skulls. And for the sake of using them. L'shem shamayim. So we go back, we go in circles.
You must be wonderful at Kiddush. You could talk about cupcakes, cake.
Yeah, well, we've got the sub-argument was what's a sandwich? Like is a hot dog and a bun a sandwich? It's an issue. I'm telling you, 5 years of my life. I'll never get it back.
And is arguing for its own sake in training for arguing for heaven's sake?
Well, maybe. I mean, that could be, right? Does that, maybe. The other thing is we're actually using the same term for its own sake and for heaven's sake, l'shem shamayim, right?
Okay.
And so maybe, is that our intention, is it what we're supposed to do in the world is to engage and to play with these things, right? And test stuff out. I once, I ended up in an argument, in a debate, in a conversation, whatever you want to call it, with someone who's a year ahead of me in school. And for long story, we were on a bus to Chicago, a minibus that one of our professors was driving. It was a whole adventure. And we were having a conversation about the college institute where I was ordained, the seminary, and involvement in political issues. And it was the weekend of March for Our Lives. So this was 2018, whatever it was. And it was the weekend of March for Our Lives. And they were asking, this professor said, do you think we should be more involved? The college should be more involved in these kinds of things. And I said, yes, if there's more context and any conversation, there was none through 5 years of school, any conversation about the lines between political and religious. We live in a country with a separation of church and state. What are the boundaries of our roles? Let's have some conversation about how do we stand up for what we believe to be right, what our Jewish values push us to do, and don't overstep our bounds. I've been asking for that conversation for 5 years. And a student in the year above me, I was a 4th year, he was a 5th year. He got on me pretty hard about it and argued with me, because I believe fundamentally you should have space in your congregations independent of who you vote for on a private ballot. I think it's important. You should have space in your congregation and access to your rabbi and all of those things. And for that belief, he told me, you have no business, you aren't a Reformed Jew and you have no business being a rabbi. That's what he told me. And we stop at a Starbucks for a pish stop. And we get out and he comes, I'm waiting for my coffee because God knows I needed a coffee after that. Waiting for my coffee. And he says to me, I just want to thank you for the machloket l'shem shamayim. And I could have punched him right in the face. I said, that's not what that was for me. I said, l'shem shamayim, I think, is 2 things. One is for its own sake. I have emotional investment in it. In the course of the conversation, he said, well, speak personally about it. And I did. I said, so this wasn't for its own sake in my world. And l'shem shamayim, I believe, is founded and rooted in some kind of respect. And I don't think we had that. It was such that felt really invalidating to me to be told that something was very personal for me and something I felt passionate about was l'shem shamayim. It's a piece of the context in this that it didn't really necessarily matter. You could have this debate forever and ever and ever. It's like the cake debate. It's one of the ways we look at l'shem shamayim. So for me, I said, I don't think that's what that was. Yeah, Alan.
With my mom, it was 2 for 1. She would say, for God's sake, hakmino chinik. So it was Yiddish and for God's sake. So it was 2 shots at one.
So
Chinik is don't bang on my kettle. Chinik is a kettle.
Oh, thank you. I never knew that.
In English, it doesn't quite have the same ring. It's the same thing. There's a great Yiddish insult, and it doesn't sound as good in English, because in English, it's may you grow like an onion with your head in the ground. So let's look at a piece of commentary on this initial idea that we read. This is Bart Nura. This is middle-aged commentator. Someone want to read this? I'm very sick of my own voice.
I will.
Go, Margie.
Every controversy that is in the name of heaven, the end thereof will endure. That is to say that the people of controversy are destined to endure and not to be destroyed, as with a dispute between Hillel and Shammai that were not destroyed. Neither they nor the students of Hillel and Shammai, but Korach and his band perished. And I heard the explanation of the end, its purpose and desired outcome. The controversy, which is for the sake of heaven, the purpose and aim is to arrive the truth. And this continues to endure, as they said, that from a disagreement, the truth will be revealed, as was revealed in the disputes between Hillel and Shammai, that the law was like the school of Hillel. And a controversy, which is not for the sake of heaven, its purpose is to achieve power and the love of victory. And its end will not endure, as we find in the dispute of Korach and his band, whose aim and end goal was a lust for honor and power, and their end was the opposite. I like that.
Teaching us about how we argue.
Well, what are we arguing for? And if it's really just to win, just to be powerful, or just to win more power, as opposed to for heaven's sake, I think of as opposed to something that God would want in terms of making the world better. And it doesn't have power. It's more about I guess justice and fairness and love than power.
And I think what's important to identify here is this is the measurement of good and bad, right? Its end will endure or its end will not endure. We want the end to endure. We are very focused. What do we say all the time? L'dor v'dor, generation to generation. We're very focused on intergenerational impact and what carries on beyond you. And so we want things that are enduring. that you leave behind you for a next generation, and they get to stand on your shoulders and build up to another level. And then someone stands on their shoulders, right? That's what we're looking to do.
Right. And we're hoping that the bad stuff does not endure,
So
but somehow it seems to.
and you don't, right. And this is saying that it doesn't merit the enduring, right? What merits it and what doesn't?
Mhm.
So how are we supposed to be? What else are we supposed to be doing? What else do we get from this? What are we supposed to do in our debates?
Show some tolerance and not yell or anything. You should have respect for the other person's opinion.
Should respect the other opinion. And what we should do, the aim should be to arrive at truth.
Mhm.
Truth is supposed to be the goal, and we're trying to find some kind of shared truth, you might even say. From a disagreement, the truth will be revealed.
Mhm.
Right? So that is what is of value. We're trying to get there. We're trying to have a purpose, right? And this is really more so about, like real arguments, less so about the cake, right? There's sort of the secondary definition of l'shem shamayim. It has become almost a little flippant in that way of like the silly arguments you have, the silly debates you have. But this kind of definition of it, this is saying the stuff that we're really emotionally invested in, the end should be to find some truth, which means what do you have to do to get into an argument? So Margie and I, we've got a bone to pick, right? And we're on two different sides of an issue. And we get into this argument. What do we have to do to try and arrive at some truth?
We have to listen and learn from each other.
We have to listen and learn. And to be able to do that, you got to do something more fundamentally in the beginning. You got to be open to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're not in it just to win. You're in it really to learn.
You're not in it for an echo chamber, and you're not in it to just hear your own voice. Right? And to make space for your own thoughts. This is one of the big problems in the ways that I think we communicate now, right? I think we are all very interested, and some more than others, in hearing our own voice, right? And making other people hear what we have to say. I think we've become less interested in hearing what others have to say. Yeah, Arnie, yeah.
You're using terms though, but you're not defining who defined those terms. For example, you're saying that it should be for truth, not for power. Okay, but like for example, what we are witnessing now in the United States is remarkable dialogue that, frankly, they believe it's true. Now you could say it's not. Well, how we could, so I'm not sure. It's great. That's very ideal. But how often does that really occur in something that counts? Not right.
Well, I think Arnie, power is what makes that so difficult. But I see it more. I know you're a scientist. I see it more as the scientific process, but more for religion, philosophy, theology. Although we're starting to quantify them, but the things that are really difficult for people to quantify, like what your school rules should be. If you have Christians and Jews, which holidays should be off, that kind of thing would get us there. And then you get involved. It's not about a particular truth, although some people may feel it is. If we allow celebration of Jewish holidays, then we're diluting our power, really, not truth. So yeah, you have to all come into it together with an understanding that this is a process that you can invest in. And if you do invest in it, there are rules. Can't humiliate other people. It will force the people arguing to find ways to use words that might get beyond the power issues. the belief and fact stuff is really hard. I listened today to Yuval Harari and Michael Sandel, and wow, I was blown away at their conversation. There were some disagreements, not too many, but they each took the words of the other person and took it in a whole nother direction. They covered so many topics that I think about, and this gave me much more to think about. So I felt like I was at a really good session of people doing this argument for heaven's sake without the power and political dynamics, although they addressed those too. So I don't know, it's one of the things I really enjoy about Torah study, and being able to find people to have good arguments for heaven's sake. And you usually, in my family, I have to explain what that means because, my original family is not Jewish. So they really have come from a tradition that's much more top-down dogma. And they don't really questioning things in their theology is, considered, what is it? Basically, I forget the word. Gosh, that's good. I've been away a long time.
Heresy?
Yes, that's one of the words. Yeah. You can't even question, so to me, it's one of the things I just absolutely love about Judaism.
This may be a good example. I took many classes, CEU, continuing education units, and the facilitator came in from Washington, and she said, I want to know how you get to Stapleton Airport. Well, we all broke off in groups and we was this way, that way, that way. At the end, she said, you all got there. And that's the only thing I remember in all those classes.
Interesting. Yeah, because it's not easy. Oh.
Right. Everybody thought theirs was the best. Except for the guy who said, go down to Colorado Springs. He wasn't with it.
So let's expand. There's another piece of commentary I want to pull up that sort of expands on some of what you spoke to, Margie, about this power piece. This is Rabbi Mark Angel. Would someone read this top piece for us?
I will.
Great.
Healthy and unhealthy controversy. The controversy of Korach and his cohorts was not for the sake of heaven. Their goal was to overthrow the leadership of Moses and Aaron in the hope of seizing political power for themselves. They did not offer a positive agenda. Rather, they preyed on the fears and frustrations of the public. When controversies are for the sake of personal gain, they are resolved by a show of power. The side that is stronger defeats the opponent. The controversy is over. History continues. These controversies are a zero-sum game. One side wins and one side loses.
Maybe a reaction.
I think that's what's so scary about the last 4 years, that it seemed like that was the way the very important arguments were going instead of the way an argument for heaven's sake should go.
But I like, sorry, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, there's from last week's Haftorah portion, from the words of Zechariah, it says, Lo b'chayil v'lo b'koach, kim b'ruchi amar Adonai tzavot, not by might nor by power, but by spirit, says the God of heaven's hosts.
Absolutely. Great Debbie Friedman song too.
Yes.
And Rabbi Markman, there he is, pulling out last week's Haftorah portion. He's ready to go.
The only one I ever knew.
Well, and Rabbi Jordy, you mentioned on Tuesday, and this is in regard to, I guess, believing in God more, but the healthy aspect of it. Do you remember? I think I wrote that down. One, you have the two definitions, and one is it had to be healthy. And that text was in this piece too. There are healthy arguments, there are unhealthy arguments, and a healthy argument is more on the side of for heaven's sake, versus an unhealthy argument, which just is maybe to gain power without anything else.
Well, and for me, I would even build off that a little bit. For me, one of the things that I read into this that I really like is that there's some kind of defining these two categories of arguing is rooted in intention.
Mhm.
The intention with which you're coming to this
Mhm.
conversation. Is your intention to bulldoze your point through, right? Or is your intention for everyone to come out feeling like they've won something? And maybe that means that at the end of an argument, right? This is saying that these kinds of controversies are a zero-sum game. One side wins, one side loses. So what's an argument where that isn't the case? What could we imagine? What might that look like? You have a debate with someone and there isn't one side that wins and one side that loses.
Well, a lot of those around the vaccine and the policies right now. No, Arnie?
No, I think the problem is that it depends on what you're arguing. Totally. And in fact, if you're going to get down to stuff that means nothing in terms of power, in terms of et cetera, well, you might as well go argue
Like
about stuff like cake. I mean, what I'm getting at is that's why I'm not sure exactly. I mean, it's very idealistic.
Mhm.
But anything that really is going to change anything is always driven by one of those three. And even in the cake controversy, it very often succumbs down to one guy trying to impress the other. So I'm not quite clear. I mean, it's ideal, yeah.
I agree that it's idealistic, right?
Totally ideal.
I think a lot of what in fairness, right? I think if we pick apart many of what our much of what our tradition teaches us, a lot of it's idealistic and perhaps not attainable. And I think some of those things exist. I don't know that idealistic is always bad or naive, right? I think sometimes there's a value to the carrot dangling in front of you. We're trying to achieve this, even if it's not achievable, trying to be that way is a value. Like what? Like I want to be honest all the time. I don't want to lie. We're told not to lie, right? I am Jewish tradition. It's reasonable to say tells us not to lie, that we should be honest. Great. I do my best. Will I ever not lie? No, it happens. Right? Because an exaggeration, that's a lie. You can categorize that as a lie. Do I exaggerate? Oh my God, if you met me, everybody exaggerates, right? I probably do a little more than others because it's just in my nature. But we can try to achieve these things, but most of it's idealistic and unattainable. I mean, I'd argue probably a lot of what values-based systems, including religions, including Judaism, puts forward as idealistic and not necessarily meant to be attained. It's meant to be something to strive towards, right? What's the really corny phrase? It's, shoot for the stars, and if you miss, you'll land among the moon. I don't know. Shoot for the moon, you land among the stars. There it is. I knew it didn't sound right.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same kind of idea, I think. I mean, I think that's a lot of what religion is teaching. We can't do most of this. Some of it we can. Don't murder. I think most of us are able to uphold that one, right? That's not so aspirational. Honor your father and mother, far more aspirational. It's the goal. We want to try and honor our parents. We don't always do it. You got feelings.
Well, the question, I mean, we're mixing apples and oranges. We're arguing about something, actually, the truth is, even like, I sit on a board of another show back in Alabama, even on things that you'd never consider controversial, to the point of like, okay, let's decide, or let's give the positive benefits. There's always somebody who's emotionally tied to it. So as soon as you have emotion in there, forget it. The idealism disappears, and the emotion can come in 50 different flavors. I don't think, give me an argument you've had in the last, say, year, last 6 months, totally emotional.
Susan, can you unmute?
Paul has done.
Oh.
Paul had to unmute me. But I think it's a matter of agreeing to disagree. When you agree to disagree, you walk away and you both have won. So therefore, there's no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Inter-
I'm not sure it's about winning as much as exploring
debate is.
towards. Huh?
In a debate, you're trying to win. You want to be the winning. So I just think it's a matter of agreeing to disagree.
When do you think about the politics yesterday in Israel? They had 4 elections. They probably said, for God's sakes, let's end this thing before we have another election. And it may work out. Will work out.
Well, we talked to our son this morning who lives in Israel, and he's not 100% sure that's going to happen. That Netanyahu could still pull it together to have a coalition behind him.
Because people don't want that.
Because Bennett is ultra conservative. I don't know, Rabbi, what do you think about all that?
I think a lot of what we have here is much more about, a lot of these pieces we're looking at is much more about person-to-person communication, right? Interpersonal communication, and less so about how we deal with disagreements like an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right? That's far more complicated, far more nuanced, far more layers. I think that what we're looking at in sort of the text we've studied this morning or this afternoon, I don't know what time it is, are more so meant to be guides in how we communicate human to human, right? Rooting ourselves in what we should always root ourselves in, which is that we were all created b'tselem Elohim, in God's image. And so if you were created in God's image, just like I was created in God's image, there's a base level of respect I should have for another creature created in God's image. Same way for animals, right? I should have respect for this creature that was created by God. This is God's creation. The world's God's creation. I should have respect for nature. I should have respect for animals. I should have respect for all of these things, all the more so with humans. I think that this is more so about interpersonal communication. And especially, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with congregants in the last, number of years who have lost close personal relationships over political disagreements. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, this is not surprising to anyone. And these are the kinds of tools and things for us to think about, I think, in trying to not reach that place. Right? When we have political conversations, you have political arguments with a friend, with a neighbor, with a colleague, with a family member, one person's trying to win. Almost always, I think that there's a winner and a loser, and you want to be the winner. I don't know that we are so open to a possibility where everyone walks away feeling like they've won something. And maybe what you win is that you learned something, or you saw something differently, or you were able to understand another person's perspective. But that's not the way that those conversations have been going, at least in my world, or in the worlds that many of you have shared with me. And I think that those are the conversations I want to sort of pull it away from, I think to superimpose this as a strategy for solving conflict in Israel, right, this is not the end all be all, right? I mean, that's sort of a naive perspective if I were to be bringing you that. But I do think that there's a lot of merit in this, in the way that we communicate with others, because we have lost a piece of, I had this conversation with a student this morning, one-on-one, about the things that we've lost in our society, the ability to disagree respectfully. I think we've lost an immense amount of that. And as we move towards this intense political correctness, we've lost the ability for satire, which I think is part of the inability to disagree, right? I was making the comparison. Does anybody watch The Office? Anybody watch The Office? All right, I'm a huge fan of The Office. I've seen every episode about 17,000 times. I can quote you most of them. The reason The Office is funny is because it's satire. Right? It pokes fun at things that are absolutely ridiculous and absurd, right? So they were trying to make the case for, they were talking about LGBTQ issues, and they find out the accountant in the office is gay. And so Michael, who's the boss, who's absolutely ridiculous, says, I'm going to take a stand and show that I support gay people. And so what he's going to do is he's going to stand in the front of the room at a full office meeting and kiss this man. Right? Which then turns into a sexual harassment lawsuit. It's a whole thing, right? But the satire and the ridiculousness of that moment is what's supposed to show us things and teach us things. But we've gotten to this place where we're picking at everything we say, at everything another person say. There's no sort of assumption of good intent. There's no baseline of being able to look reflectively at ourselves, that I think we've lost so many of these pieces. And that's where I think that these texts can come in to sort of support us in that journey back. Because I worry about what happens if we keep moving in this direction. I think it's problematic. I'll now get off of my soapbox here. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, as they say. The one you didn't sign up for.
But we did sign up for it. Here we are.
Well, fair. Absolutely fair.
I just want to say one thing. The place that I have found that does real arguments, for heaven's sake, around controversial issues is the Hartman Institute. And I'm really impressed. Whenever my head's about to explode from reading, the newspaper, especially the last few weeks, I remember them go on, and I really find some solace there. I think they know how to do this. Are you familiar?
They've had several classes in Denver, the Hartman.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At different
Yeah.
synagogues.
Yeah. They have, it's called Identity Crisis, I think. And you listen, to whatever that specific topic is. But there's just a great deal of respect for each other. And I learn a lot listening to it. And I learn a lot about how I might approach a topic I can't generally, with my sibling even. And I think, okay, maybe if there's an opportunity, I might be able to use that as a bridge, in effect, to at least respect what he would say and not dismiss him completely because I think he's a racist, that kind of thing.
Yes. Louis, you got a lot of facial expressions happening. There was clapping.
I'm just in 100% agreement with everything we're talking about here. We need a lot more bridges and a lot more rational debate and discussion, and a lot less putting anti-halo effects around people and stereotypical projection. And if we take, it's, not all people have that as their base case, but I love listening to debates with people, somebody who, what I would consider a sane person on the right and a sane person on the left, talking rationally rather than all this other I was going to say BS. I don't think I can say that.
I think no. There's a piece that I think really relates to sort of where we've landed just now from Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Mm-hmm. Was a brilliant scholar who did not recognize my rabbinate, and I always, I have many colleagues who won't use his texts and won't use Samson Raphael Hirsch or any of these sort of male Orthodox rabbis who wouldn't have recognized us. I think all the more reason to study this, because there's merit in what they're saying, and I believe there's merit in using it in my rabbinate, and so we put those two together. And I think this is important. And look at the work that it comes from, the dignity of difference. What a great term. Truth on earth is not, nor can be, the whole truth. It is limited, not comprehensive, particular, not universal. When two propositions conflict, it is not necessarily because one is true and the other is false. It may be, and often is, that each represents a different perspective on reality, an alternative way of structuring order, no more and no less commensurable than a Shakespearean sonnet, a Michelangelo painting, or a Schubert sonata. In heaven there is truth, on earth there are truths. Therefore, each culture, I don't know why there's that break, has something to contribute. Each person knows something no one else does. The sages said, who is wise? One who learns from all men. The wisest is not all humans. The wisest is not one who knows himself wiser than others. He's one who knows all men have some share of the truth and is willing to learn from them. For none of us knows all the truth, and each of us knows some of it.
He was brilliant.
Brilliant.
Mhm.
And Arnie, I fully want to acknowledge, I hear the aspirational in here. It's idealistic, right? I see that this is an idealistic setup. And I think if we don't aspire to the ideal, we're cutting off our potential for growth and progress and our capacity to reach something bigger if we don't aspire to the ideal. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree. I mean, I gotta ask a question of the group. Do you think the problem now, like Louis, what you're saying is perfect, and I agree with you. But do you think the problem now is that number of people have dropped, or that suddenly we've given voice and a soapbox to the group that otherwise we would never interface with? I mean, I'm just interested to hear others' opinions.
Well, with social media especially, I think people get empowered when, people pick them up and like them or, whatever else. And then, of course, I think also can be empowered by leadership, whether, you agree with it or not. So it's a complicated question, Arnie. But yes, we are in a place, and everything I'm reading is social media is the one of at least the foundational problems in this, and that's, they took Trump off of social media, and that's still very controversial. But I personally am finding life easier. So yeah, it's tough. It's multifaceted, lots of variables. Education.
If you want a really scary
I don't.
view of something, no. This is another session in where it's coming out of an anthropology group, actually, you. And basically, it's a 6-part series on PBS, which you can watch on HBO or HBO Max. I'm getting it through Netflix, called Q. And it's a 6-part series on QAnon. And if you really, educational, yes. Scary, mind-boggling. Okay, and that's what we have to worry about. Not me arguing with Jerry or Alan. And I don't even know how we approach that. You have to really watch that.
Yeah, that is one of the arguments now. And with not just, the social media, but AI, which that was very much a part of Yuval's conversation today. It's whoa. Again, things that technologies have power for good or bad. So the argument to me, for heaven's sake, is how can you ensure that it's used for good? Not easy. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen those or heard about the studies that were done over and over again, where there was a guy at the front of a classroom with 3 long lines and 1 short line. And everybody in the room was told to say the short line was the long lines, except for one guy. And everybody said the long one is the short one. And after a while, the guy says, "Hey, the short one's the," he basically, it was plain as day.
Yeah.
So this is the problem that social media has. And this is only one example of this type of study that's been done on groupthink. But if somebody keeps saying the same thing over and over and over again, social media, and it can be on the left or it can be on the right, and we are being manipulated. I'm sorry. We have to be careful with that. And we're being split, and that's causing tensions. And both sides are doing this, in my opinion.
Well,
The other element that comes with that is what are called echo chambers, echo systems. If you want today you believe, or you want to believe, that the world is flat, it'll take you 12 minutes on the internet to find enough people to bounce the idea back and forth. And that was one of the big things they're talking about now with social media. how do you connect these echo chambers? Because you don't, in the old days, if it was just you at home with that belief, hey, but now you'll immediately find the other 1,000 Meshuggahs who think the same thing.
Well, and I think the extra layer to it is that social media has created a layer of or an option for a layer of anonymity in these conversations that emboldens people.
And bots, yeah.
Yeah, and a lack of accountability as well. You need the bots for sure, right? You can manipulate how things look. And, right, I could go right now and make an account and I could tell everybody that, you know, I'm Jerry Lasso. And I could go say all kinds of things as Jerry Lasso and no one knows it's not me, right? Or I could go in and say, you know, I'm Joe Smith. And I could build an entire following, right? And start spreading things, right? Or saying just horribly nasty things to others, even not on a mass scale, right? If I needed, you know, sometimes we have some anger and you need a place to put some anger, which I totally see and get. And I think it's a healthy acknowledgement, right? But you have a place to put some anger. I could go make an account and just go send you all really nasty emails. Comment on your pictures with nasty, nasty things, right? They're going to really ruin your day and really be disturbing to you, right? As a way to get out the anger because you don't know it's me. There's no accountability of the decision, right? And I think that those pieces are starting to have real impact on our culture and the way that we view our relationships with others because there's no accountability. There's no responsibility for the way that we treat other humans. There doesn't have to be. I think that's a problem.
Not in terms of lies and the truth, for sure. Yeah.
For sure. Well, and you know, if you're going to talk about our kids who are, you know, exposed to all of this, who don't have grounding or don't have the rooting to know what's real and what's not, or to, you know, don't feel comfortable going to someone when some of these things happen. I mean, these are really big concerns as we move forward. Is how do we, you know, reinvent that? You know, think about being a middle schooler, being a high schooler, especially for girls, right? It's a hard way through. That's a harsh time of your life. Add on that there's a way to say things to people with no accountability, right? There's a way to communicate with people where I don't have to be accountable for my actions. I can do whatever I want. That's a problem. And I think that as more people start to find that to be the truth, to be an option, whether or not it's a thing that they're going to take as an option, I think that impacts our culture, it impacts our society, and it impacts our communication. There's different weight to the communication. I think there's less weight on our communication because because the volume of communication has just drastically increased, right? I mean, 100 years ago, my parents live in Boston. 100 years ago, I wouldn't have all that much communication with my parents, right? Now, I've talked to my mother, I think 4 times on FaceTime today alone, and it's 1 p.m., 3 p.m. on the East Coast. Like, give me the extra 2 hours, right? But 4 times on face-to-face alone. That doesn't include a text. That doesn't include an email. That doesn't include this funny video I sent her this morning. There's an immense amount of communication. The volume is so immense that every interaction is just a smaller piece of the puzzle. And I think we put less weight on it because it's a smaller percentage of the overall communication, but it doesn't mean it's less weighty. It doesn't mean our words have any less meaning. We're just using more of them. And so we need to be more conscious. The words don't have less meaning. We need to be more conscious about the meaning that they have.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to confess that I lean a little bit to the right, and I got tired of defending my argument, and now I say you're right. My pressure's down, and I just still want to say you're right. And they look at me and they, what am I gonna? It's over. You're right.
Yeah.
One other commentary, because this is an amazing article that talked about the fact that this is a quantum change in history. Okay? This is like the development of the steam engine. Now, what's the quantum change? We're in the perfect storm at the moment. And the emergence, we're going to come out with a series of authoritarian states. We're going to march backwards before we come forward. The reason, what's the perfect storm? Well, things that have caused it. The pandemic put stress on everybody. Economic instability. Everybody is unsure at this stage. It's got to recover. Okay. The internet, social media, you have instant communication to any view you aspire to. And bigotry and blaming things are a natural outcome, a natural response. People will want stability. And once you want stability, and enough people come to that conclusion, then welcome the Donald Trumps and the Putins and all these guys. They'll march right in, and you don't care what they're saying as long as they're promising you stability.
Yeah, I'm going to send you that link, Arnie, because the political philosopher at the very end surprised me with how confront is too strong a word. I mean, they were great. But how he said to the historian, yes, you're right about this and this and this, but the most important thing is the politics. And that was fascinating to me. And he gave some interesting examples. And I have to listen to it again, but I think Yuval actually was moved by that and agreed.
What was the venue? What was the venue?
So I think it's just a venue online because of the pandemic.
Oh.
And I'd be happy to I'll send the link to Rabbi Jordy, and, maybe you could put it in the chat, or can I put it in the chat? Let me see if I can do that. Yeah. But I've read Yuval's books, Homo Sapiens, is my husband, who's, major science and quantum physics, and those are the things that get his juices going. And for me, I'm much more on the other side, the Michael Sandel side of what is ethical, given where we are and where we've been and who our people are and what we've signed on to. So of course I had to listen to it, and I'm just so glad people like this are alive. I wish more people could hear it.
I have to mention this. 6 months ago, I mentioned on Comcast channel 1684, there's a Jewish broadcasting system, and you just have to watch it. It's right up, I think, everyone's alley. And there's a show, interview with Rabbi Mark Gallup. It's called L'Chaim, and you just gotta watch it.
That's JBS, right?
Yes, JBS.
Yeah, you can also they record all the episodes on YouTube too. So if you want to see anything in the past, you just go to YouTube and you can see.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know that.
What's the what word do you need?
Jewish. Go ahead.
Let's type in JBS and you'll get it.
I'm gonna get the link for you all right now. It used to be called Shalom TV.
Yeah, it's also on channel 388 on DirecTV.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
There's the YouTube page, and then if you just click on videos, it'll have all of their content. I think that's the right one.
A liberal rabbi from New York City, he gave a sermon. I don't know his name, forgot his name. I'll try to find the link, but he was just outstanding. And on Shabbat, they have services from Central Synagogue in Manhattan and from the Hampton Bay Synagogue in Hampton Bay, Long Island. And that's conservative, leaning towards Orthodox. And I'm watching that because what they do with the subtitles, they have the Hebrew, then the transliteration, and then they tell you what it means. It's just unbelievable.
You know where they also have services on Friday? Temple Sinai in Denver.
Well, no, after Sinai, and
Of course, no, there are so many wonderful things, and there's lots for us to see that's around the country that's now been made available. And so, we can learn more and see more. And
I'm afraid there may have been a white lie. So anybody says they don't lie is a liar.
yeah, I'm putting the link. I found the link, I think, to what you're talking about, Margie, and put it in the chat.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for playing this game with us on another day, another round of learning, and respectful learning, which is always important to me. That You know, I think there's a lot of, as we've said, there's a lot of disrespectful conversation out there in the world. And it's always important to me that what we're creating and facilitating at Sinai is not that. And so that's a direct reflection of all of you who make it not that kind of way. Women's Torah studies tonight help. I know some of you are coming, help us spread the clarity on it that it is in person only. We're having some miscommunication about it, but we've got a lovely group registered to come. Hopefully everyone still comes. It's going to be a beautiful evening, and we're going to be in the courtyard. The fountain just got cleaned. It's all nice and pretty out there. It's going to be lovely. So we'll see you tonight for those of you who are joining us for Women's Torah Study, and then hopefully we'll see everyone tomorrow night, 6 p.m. services, and then of course there's at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, we have the Minyan, and Micah Zucker is going to become a bar mitzvah in that service. And then next Friday, we're very excited. Dan and I are going to be at, oh man, what's the park name? They changed it to me. Westlands Park.
That's our park, yeah.
That's where.
Yeah.
Oops.
But next Friday night, we've got 5 o'clock Tot Shabbat for the little ones, and then a regular service for all ages, including the not so little ones, at 6 p.m. outdoors. It's going to be really lovely. We're excited to be outside.
I have to mention one more thing. In today's political atmosphere, if you have a Torah study for women, are men excluded? When a female rabbi has a trip to Israel, so I think we have to cross that bridge. I went to cooking classes, virtual. I don't see,
So I think, I think we still ascribe and associate value with single gendered programming, which we have men's programming as well at Sinai.
Yes.
I just don't run that.
Yeah, we have
Beers.
Bible and beers.
Exactly. There's Brotherhood Bible and Beers, and there was a request for women to study Torah through the lens of women's issues and in an all-female space. And
Experiences, yeah.
Yes. And so
Okay.
someone says, we want to study Torah in this way. Anybody says, I want to study Torah, period, on the sentence, I'm never saying no. We're always going to make more options. So for sure, we're going to roll with it. And this is why we also have once a month a men's
Rabbi,
experience.
just to settle a question for you, a hot dog in a bun is not a sandwich. It's paradise.
and especially a Philadelphia hot dog, right?
I don't eat red meat, so it's not my thing. But 5 years of my life, I'm never getting back that I spent talking about sandwiches and cake. So
You could be a New Jersey child of Temple Sinai.
you ever want to debate the merits of a cheesecake or a brownie? I'm your girl. I've heard it. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Find time to get outside. It's so beautiful. I'm going to try and do the same. So
Thank you.
nice to see you all.